Hello and welcome to the Crimson Stitchery, a video channel about making all things beautiful and useful, featuring knitting, sewing, mending and much more. My name is Anushka. You can find me elsewhere online as A Sour Telling, that's A Sour Telling, that's my username on Instagram and Ravelry, where we also have a Ravelry group. And do click into the down bar here on YouTube to find show notes and relevant links to things that I mention. So first and foremost, let's just mention the elephant in the room. Yes, I am podcasting wearing a pair of pyjamas. And I'm going to be talking about that in my sewing section. And normally I start off with what's in my knitting basket, but I thought that since we're here, I would just talk about sewing first off. So yeah, it's a weirdly kind of overcast yet up and down with the sun and with the temperature kind of weather here in London. One moment it's boiling hot and I'm stripping off into a pair of hot pants, and the next minute it's freezing cold and out come all of the shawls, woolies, woolly jumpers and woolly socks all over again. So it's been quite nice to have a pair of slightly glamorous, fairly extravagant cotton pyjamas to wear recently. And yes, sitting here with a cup of English breakfast tea, so do grab something to drink if you haven't done already. So I started these pyjamas quite a few months ago. I think it might have even been back in December, and I talked about that then because I completed the trousers first and it's taken me quite a while to get around to finishing the jacket. So first off, here is the pattern that I used. It is style 4262 and it is a, I would hazard a guess to say late 1960s vintage sewing pattern that I purchased on eBay for not a lot of money. Absolutely lovely little design. So that's the front of the envelope, and then that is the back. So as you can see, it comes with a pyjama jacket, long and short sleeve variations with patch pockets, a pair of what look like very flared, almost bell-bottom pyjama trousers, and also a pair of matching knickers. So incredibly, incredibly sweet. And I just love all of the details, the layered haircut in the illustration and her little pink mules that she's wearing there. I think it's such a shame that most vintage sewing patterns are undated. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. In the copyright information, it says copyright 1973, and it was published in Tottenham Court Road, London, in Canada, Ontario, and in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and printed in Great Britain. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? 1973, and then exported to Canada, which was obviously a British colony, and so was South Africa actually, between the Dutch and the British. So there's this very interesting sort of colonial migration of sewing patterns, which has been studied. If I can find it, I will pop in a little link. I've read a paper quite a few years ago on travelling British dressmaking patterns to colonial India in the 19th century. So that was quite interesting, just from that little bit of copyright information, a little bit of socio-cultural and colonial / post-colonial history there, looking at sort of trade distribution networks amongst home dressmaking. So anyway, 1973, so early 70s, not late 60s. That makes sense because you've got that sort of layered haircut here. And also that very Twiggy-esque makeup with the very thin eyebrows and the very strong eyelashes there in the illustration. Yes, I have a master's degree in fashion history, so spent quite a few years reading imagery like this. Anyway, so I had been wanting a pair of proper pyjamas for quite a long time, with a matching shirt-based top jacket and a pair of trousers, and yeah, quite a few years, and I was basically feeling too lazy for absolutely ages to get round to drafting them myself. So I eventually purchased this on eBay, and then it took me even longer to get around to cutting it out. And I've got some very, very lovely fabric. If I get a little bit closer to the camera, the polka dot is actually a cotton and steel cat's print. It's a cat faces with little pink smiles, plain polka dots and also moons. and it's a discontinued cotton and steel print called Cat Lady. And oh, I don't know if you can see, I've still got a little bit of basting that I've left in the pocket and need to pull out. And then I've got lots of contrast work done in this really lovely cotton lawn vintage quilting fabric. Well, it's probably not designed to be quilting fabric. It's probably more of a dressmaking fabric, this flowery one, because it's quite a bit thinner, but it was in a bundle of quilting fabrics that I basically inherited from a relative clearing out a cupboard. So that was cotton lawn, quite fine. And then the main is quilting cotton, so it's much more coarsely woven, thicker, stiffer, and very, very lovely. And then the facings I've also got on the inside here. And the cuffs, pockets, it's got a lovely little stand collar, and then it's got some gold vintage buttons. Just I rummaged round through to the bottom of my sewing button tin. And yes, I'm really happy that they are finally done. And then if I hop up onto the sofa, you can also see that I have got the bottom of the trousers trimmed in this floral navy fabric too. And basically I purchased the fabric from a shop in Singapore when I was there for a research field trip for my master's degree, all the way back in 2016, so coming up to 4 years now. And I intended to make a dress from it, but I then changed my mind and decided that I was no longer in the place in my life where I wanted to have a cat dress. So I eventually decided to make these pyjamas. But basically I had purchased an amount for a dress, so I think it was around 2.5 meters, possibly 3, and not enough for a full pyjama set. So as I mentioned in my video a couple of months ago, I'll put a link in the card up here on YouTube if you want to watch that video in depth. Basically I had to be extremely frugal with my pattern cutting. I slashed away at seam allowances, I made things quite a lot shorter, made the trousers quite a lot narrower by doing a kind of a pleat, sort of the opposite of when you add volume to a trouser. I pleated it in and just did loads of basically patchworking. So for instance, in the trouser inseam, I don't just have a front and a back piece, I've actually got a long strip in the middle just to add extra fabric from the borders, where I just had to sew in and sort of Frankenstein all of the pieces together. And I had to put in this weird gusset thing right at the crotch in between the forks of the front and the back. And at first that was a little bit challenging, and there were so many extra seams, especially in the trousers, that it just felt a little bit weird. But actually, as I've worn it a lot more, all of the fabric has just softened up and it's just stopped being an issue at all. So I'm quite pleased with that. I was considering buying another metre or 2 of the fabric just so that I could cut the pyjamas out with no problems, but I decided not to, because firstly, it had been discontinued. So whilst I could find it on a very, very few online shops, they were all overseas, and it was going to be quite expensive with postage and import tax and take absolutely ages. So in the end I did all of that alteration to the pattern just to sort of pull it in a little bit all around the edges and sort of in the middles as well. And then I did all of this extra work with the contrast. So I've got these big contrast cuffs, they made the sleeves shorter so that was easier to deal with, on the trousers as well. The pockets, the pattern was cut in the way of a shirt in which the centre front line extended out, so it had a self-facing or self-placket that was folded inside. So obviously I got rid of that and I added in a seam, and I added in, if I unbutton it here, contrast facing there, which was no problem at all. And then the other thing to note is that because this cotton lawn fabric that I used as a sort of co-fabric was so much thinner, I underlined it in most cases. So in the pockets, I've underlined it with a lot of horrible polycotton just to make it firmer. Same in the cuffs of both the jacket and the trousers. And I did the same in the collar. And then I put a strip of iron-on interfacing down the centre fronts to reinforce the buttons and the buttonholes. But I didn't want to put interfacing in the collar because I didn't want it to be too stiff. But in hindsight, I think I should have actually put something a little bit stiffer in the collar, something more than that underlining of polycotton, because it just has a tendency to collapse a little bit around my neck and it doesn't quite hold its shape. So I think it was just a matter of finding the right kind of underlining that managed to hold its form enough but not feel like it was sort of digging in and pressing into my neck. So that's something that's quite good to note, that actually, you know, in certain areas you can sort of scrimp a little bit, say, with the stiffness or texture of underlining or reinforcing backing fabrics, but at other times actually it's quite important just to follow the rules and go for it. So I'm absolutely delighted with these. One of the reasons that the top took me so long to finish was because, well, obviously I had to set in the sleeves, that was quite complicated, but also I had to put in the buttonholes, and I decided to finally bite the bullet and teach myself how to use the automatic buttonholer on my Bernina sewing machine, my Bernina Sport, which is from the early 90s and which my grandma very kindly gave to me all the way when I was a young lass of 18. I think she gave it to me as my 18th birthday present, and I was just embarking onto my degree in historical and performance costume making. So I've had her for quite a while. She's probably older than me, possibly, or maybe around the same age, and she's got an automatic buttonhole knob where you basically turn it and it does different things, and I don't know why I'd always been intimidated at learning how to do it, and I've tried different ways of buttonholings. I've done it by hand, which was awful. I've done it the tailoring method, where you sort of break it down into sort of that Ford machine production steps. We do all of one stage and all of the next stage and all of the next. And I've done it in the basic dressmaking way, where you go down and you go across and down and across on each individual buttonhole, changing all of the settings by hand. And that always took ages. So I finally bit the bullet and taught myself how to use it, and it was definitely worth taking like extra 45 minutes or something like that to learn a new skill and to practice on. So if there's something like that with your machine and you've just not got around to learning it, please do, because it is so worth it. And I just thought, why didn't I do this when I was doing my costume degree? All of those hundreds and hundreds of buttonholes that I had to put in when I was learning how to make tailored suits, for example, 3-piece tailored suits, with button, like Victorian tailored suits with, you know, a waistline that went up to here and a button fly with all of the buttons, and buttons here and here and here, and on the waistcoat so many buttons, and then brace buttons, oh, so many buttons and buttonholes. And I thought, gosh, I could have saved hours more work, you know, hours of work could have been saved, and I could have been just dossing around in all of that time instead. So yeah, pretty glad about that. And I'm just generally really delighted about the pyjamas. I really want to make another set, again in navy, and I'd like to make it in a navy brushed cotton, winceyette or cotton flannel kind of fabric, and I'd like to go the whole hog and not have to do any taking in, and go for those really glorious full-bodied trouser legs, and probably go for the, not the stand collar, but the fold over collar with lapel. And I'd like to take it a step further and put in like piping and stuff like that and make it quite traditional. But I've definitely got quite a lot of fabric in my stash and a lot of things to be getting on with, so I'm going to think of that as a sort of maybe a summer project, a lovely reward project after I sew just a few more bundles of cloth from my stash. And one of the bundles that I've got is this lovely stuff, which I got in the same from the same shop in the same research trip to Singapore. So I basically got it in central Singapore. I think the MRT station is called, is it Chinatown? It's something like that. And it's this like really old-fashioned, slightly run-down old shopping centre, and it's quite dilapidated. It's not like the rest of Singapore at all. Hasn't really been updated since probably the 70s, I would guess, or maybe 80s. And if you're Singaporean, I'm sure that you know exactly what I mean. And you walk up the stairwell, and there's a couple of floors where they have haberdashery shops and loads of fabric shops too. And in Singapore, for a number of years, anything Japanese has just been all the rage. So this one that I'm wearing, Cat Lady, although Cotton and Steel is an American brand, I believe, the fabric itself was printed and made in Japan. And then this one here is obviously based on a traditional Japanese woodblock print pattern that would have done originally with real indigo. And I don't think that this is real indigo at all. I think it's probably synthetic indigo, and it's definitely sort of machine printed, probably, I think, just because it's so perfect. But it's really good quality, so it's linen, and basically you can see that on the inside it looks just as good as the outside, which is really a signature of quality in print, as opposed to this one, which you can see it's very faded on the inside. Not an expert on printing, but just some things that I've observed. And yes, so this is with linen. So this was, I purchased it in the same trip, again, 2.5 meters, and intending it to become a shift dress. And then a couple of weeks ago, when I was chatting about my howdy jacket, my silk howdy, I was talking about wanting to remake it in this fabric. And then I just got it into my head that actually, wouldn't it be lovely if I could have a set instead of just the howdy jacket with the big sleeves? If I could have a set instead, that might be really great. So again, it therefore involves squeezing a lot of stuff into not a lot of space, and I used the trouser pattern from this but shortened it. And I'm still working on the jacket because it's not going to be a pyjama set, it's just going to be a loungewear set, and I've decided that I want to add jetted pockets, tailored jetted pockets into the jacket, so they're very subtle, and that's going to require a little bit of work, so hopefully I will get to that this weekend. So I'm not going to show you these yet, but I'll probably do another outfit in loungewear, but the ones that I'm wearing now are sleepwear, and these ones are not. These ones are loungewear for the day. And if you've been following my Me Made May in my Instagram stories, you'll have seen these crop up, and I've also got it saved as a story highlight, so you'll have seen these trousers crop up already, and it's just going to look so awesome when it's got a matching jacket as well. And I'm probably going to look fairly eccentric, but I'm quite used to that, hence doing a podcast in an actual pair of pyjamas. So yeah, lots and lots of sewing. So now let's talk about knitting and what's in my knitting basket, and I just want to make a couple of announcements about knit-alongs. So firstly, we have the Stashless 2020 initiative going on over here on YouTube, in the Ravelry group, and on Instagram, which is where we make an attempt to reflect a little bit more on our acquiring habits and our purchasing decisions in the recent past, and think a little bit harder and do our best to do some work with materials that we already own, possibly patterns that we already own, in our personal libraries and yarny collections. So that's been going on since January, and the thread over in Ravelry has become very engaging and lively, and we're having really in-depth discussions about various different things. So yes, do join in along there. Anytime, you're welcome to just dip your toe in at any point, and don't worry if you've only just found this channel or discovered this initiative, you're not too late. It's going on for the rest of the year. And I'll just speak a little bit more about my Stashless projects in a moment. But the next knit-along is the Crimson Sockalong, which is a 6-month-long, there's lots of difficult consonants to pronounce, 6-month long knit-along for working on any of my sock patterns, of which I've currently got 3 out available in my Ravelry store. And I am going to be releasing a new pattern a month for the foreseeable future. So I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with, especially to do with my more recent releases, which include the Twister Lolly socks that I've got in here, which are lacy. And then lastly, I mentioned a couple of videos ago that I wanted to be wrapping up the knit-along that I ran last year, which was the Vintage Shetland Spring Curl, which was for working on projects from this book here. It's pretty heavy. The Vintage Shetland project by Susan Crawford, and I did the prize draw for that now, and the winner is Miss Angela, or Miss Angel Tees, I think your Ravelry username is. So I've been in touch with Angela already, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who participated in that knit-along. It was really lovely to have that warmth and community support for the first knit-along that I hosted over on this channel, and people created some absolutely beautiful things, and there was just generally lots of camaraderie and humour And the thing about this book is that a lot of the projects are quite complicated. There's a lot of Shetland colour work, there's complicated beaded lace and all sorts of other things. I myself chose to make a jumper that was quite a bit more straightforward. But because a lot of the projects were quite tough, to be honest with you, whilst it was great to have a lot of community support, some of the projects got a little bit the better of the knitters, I think, which is a bit of a shame, but totally understandable. So I hope that everyone continues working on projects with the Vintage Shetland project anyway, and you know, feel free to tag me on Instagram or use the hashtag at any point so that we can all check them out and have a look. So yes, congratulations Angela, and if you didn't win the prize draw, don't worry, because there's lots of other knit-along initiatives coming up, including Stashless 2020 and the Crimson Sockalong, but you know, maybe something else will arise then, who knows. So speaking of Stashless 2020, I managed to do another de-stashing project in knitting. So obviously I had the pyjamas and I've got this outfit on the go, and then I've got 2 balls of alpaca yarn that were given to me quite a few years ago by my friend Ellie Skein when she was clearing out some leftovers, and I pounced on this lovely packet of blue and white alpaca because I wanted to do a Breton stripe marinière or something like that kind of garment, and I wanted to design it myself, and I have got so many plans for the perfect Breton jumper, and it's kind of like being paralysed by perfectionism and paralysed by choice, because there's just so many different ways that it could go. And a few months ago I just said to myself, just draw out all of the options and just pick one and then work on that pattern, and then you know, one can work on the other variations in the future. So I'm trying not to be so sort of procrastinating on that decision making, because I've definitely suffered from that need in writing knitting patterns, that you're constantly needing to cut things away and make decisions about what to leave out. You know, in order to do one thing, all of these other paths have to become obsolete or left behind, and it's something that I'm getting better at doing, and just trusting in my own confidence at how things work. A. B. Getting better at swatching and just trying out all of those designs, and if necessary, getting them out of my system through a swatch, and then C. Just accepting that not every design can be everything. So anyway, that was a lot of chat about imaginary knitting, but I've got all of this blue and white stuff in my stash, so I knocked up a pair of fingerless mitts for my auntie, whose birthday it is today, so happy birthday, Ai, and they were just really lovely to work on. I just improvised them on the needles, and yeah, it was just a very fast and lovely experience to make a lovely soft and fuzzy pair of gloves. And these days she keeps sending me pictures of cute alpacas and llamas on Instagram, so hopefully she'll make the connection to the yarn that she's got. And she's actually really cheeky, because when I asked her what she wanted for her birthday, bearing in mind that I asked her at the beginning of May and her birthday is mid-May, and I said, what do you want for your birthday? And she said a fisherman's jumper, and I was just like, no, you're so cheeky, no. And then she just kept asking and asking for all these garments, and I was like, no, I can't make a jumper in 2 weeks. I'm still working 2 jobs. I'm not on furlough. Yeah, anyway, she's just really cheeky. She was just trying it, so maybe she'll get a fisherwoman's jumper for her next birthday, which will be quite a big one actually. So we'll see. She's very, very, very knit-worthy, and I've made her a lot of stuff over the years, ever since I started knitting when I was 14 or so, mainly because she was never too shy to ask. She'll just ask me to make her stuff, and I've always been quite happy to, because she is my favourite. And yeah, unfortunately a lot of the stuff that I made her got destroyed when her house got flooded a few years ago, and that was obviously really tragic and a just a general saga that went on for a number of years, dealing with that. And yeah, half of her wardrobe got destroyed, including my knitwear, by the water. So yeah, I guess her knitty stocks can be replenished now that the house is in a safer space and I can do some more knitting for her, basically. So that's those gloves. And then the other thing is, oh yes, my sock for my next sock knitting pattern in this amazing, vibrant, I don't even know how to describe this, it's kind of like a fuchsia purple. I'm not showing it too closely, and it is in yarn that has been hand dyed by Travel Knitter. And I just want to speak about this briefly. And last episode I mentioned thank you to everybody who has bought me a coffee, and I mentioned in depth that the money, the income that you're giving me through Ko-fi, that sort of crowd-funded investment into my designing for the Crimson Stitchery, I've been trying to pay it forward and then make an investment in other small knitty businesses. So I've been, I wanted to mention that here because it's Yarn Shop Week, and there are some initiatives being run by UK-wide local yarn shops, including the one where I have attended their monthly knit night in East London quite regularly, which is Wild and Woolly. So this is by Travel Knitter, who dies in East London, and I live in outer East London, and purchased from Wild and Woolly. So I'm just giving these yarn shops a shout out. And then I also bought for the upcoming socks collection this lovely tangerine, kind of soft tangerine. It's a very different type of yarn to the hand dye. It's onion nettle sock yarn, so I thought that would be quite good for the summery sock collection, to have a plant-based fibre in with the wool. It's got a lot of white in it and it's quite hairy, so it's sort of like a fitting in with my summery ice cream, 90s ice creams theme. So these are from Wild and Woolly. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Knit with Attitude, which is where I purchased this blue Coupe Knits sock here, actually on the Yarn Shop Day last year. And Coupe Knits is also a British brand. And then lastly but not least, I wanted to mention Tribe Yarns, where I purchased this fluorescent Coupe Knit sock here. So the same yarn, different shop, different source, and it's a real treasure trove, that shop, especially if you love hand-dyed yarns and sort of shawl and sock yarns. So yeah, I just wanted to give those three ventures a shout out, Wild and Woolly, Tribe Yarns and Knit with Attitude, because I've mentioned before that I'm extremely discerning on all of my channels. So this YouTube channel, my Instagram page Ravelry, and my monthly newsletter, I'm extremely discerning about what brands I talk about, what companies I mention, and who I choose to give a shout out. So put it this way, if I don't mention like a designer or a magazine publisher or something like that when it should be blindingly obvious, like there's going to be a reason for that. And if I mention the brand, there's going to be a reason for that. You know, sometimes I guess it's inevitable. But yeah, I'm very careful about that, and I'm very glad to promote all of these amazing retailers, which are women owned, which are very friendly, welcoming, open places, and which have always been very welcoming personally to me. You know, even when I, for instance, in Wild and Woolly, she runs a monthly knit night, and she asks for a donation contribution of £5 per month, or you bring along something to eat and drink instead of giving money. And obviously she's keeping the shop open and all of that kind of thing, and giving us somewhere to sit. You know, for instance, I've turned up there on an occasion where I had a really bad day, where I'd left my purse at home and I didn't have anything. I had my knitting, but I had nothing to contribute, and no money to contribute either. And she was just like very understanding and didn't mind. So there's a lot of kindness there, and a lot of community that's been built through that shop and the knitters that frequent it. So yes, the other question I had to ask for you is, obviously these are the yarns that I bought with your Ko-fi support for my sock collection. So let's hold those all up. and I'm going to have to make some more purchases. So I've got this purple, blue, fluorescent yellow and soft tangerine, and I'm gonna have to buy let me think, 1, 2, 3, I think I'm gonna have to buy another 3 sock yarns to complete the collection. And the theme is 1990s confectionery and ice lollies, and I think hopefully you can recognise the kind of 90s colours that I've got in this bundle here, especially if you imagine like inline skates and the kind of woven patterns that would go alongside those and that kind of thing, and like hair braids, hair wraps, yeah, all of that kind of stuff. And I'd love to know what other colours you think I should go for, or other yarns I should go for to make these samples and the imagery for the rest of the collection. So yeah, feel free to comment down below and let me know. Is there another 90s shade that I've completely overlooked? Obviously brown lipstick, but no thank you. I was thinking maybe a Barbie pink, like a sugary Barbie pink, and then maybe more of a, this is kind of like a soft aqua, but maybe a bit of a bolder turquoise possibly. So yeah, let me know what you think. What is the glaringly obvious 90s shade that I have missed out? Maybe it's like a caterpillar green? I'd love to know. I'd be really interested to hear what you think, and yeah, let me know. So what else have we got? We've got this yellow that I have just been working away at. A bit of ribbing, not really very much to see there, and that is using a pattern from the Vintage Shetland project. Oh no, not the Vintage Shetland, A Stitch in Time 2 by Susan Crawford, another independent, you know, family run business and yarn retailer that I'm more than delighted to give a shout out to, Susan Crawford. And also just wanted to add that I've bought everything here, like none of this has been gifted and none of this is paid sponsorship or freebies, and if I've ever received a freebie, which is pretty rare, I always make that clear. So yeah, just getting all of my ethics out there and in the forefront. And yes, I'm making this jumper that is, or cardigan rather I should say, that's on the back cover. Tri-cable stitch cardi, and I love the little garter stitch tie at the neck. I think it is so sweet, and I'm going to make some alterations to it because I'm going to make it a bit more cropped and a bit more fitted and in a sort of slightly different way, and slightly less granny-ish for want of a better word. I know I have a lot of grannies who are my viewers and I love my granny, but this, yeah, I'm trying to get it to be a bit more extreme with the details and less sort of safe, let's say. Yeah. sorry to grannies. I didn't mean to imply that everybody was sort of harmless. That's definitely not the case. Anyway, hopefully you can appreciate my good intentions. And then the last thing that I need to talk about is the other jumper from the same book that I've made for my granny while we're on the topic of grannies. And it is this. It is called Quick Work in Thick Wool, and I have made pink work in thick wool. And again, got this yarn from Wild and Woolly, and it is Gilead by dressmaking. And yeah, absolutely love it. My camera battery just died and I thought I'd take the opportunity to get changed out of my pyjamas and put on this jumper. So I was just saying that the yarn that I knit it in I purchased from Wild and Woolly, and it is Gilead de dressmaking, the French brand, and it is non-superwash merino, and it's like a very environmentally conscious company that, you know, take a lot of precautions with their like waste and their dyeing practices and so on. So yes, definitely an ethical choice. And the colourway is argile, which I looked up and means clay, so I guess that kind of pink clay, and it's got these lovely dark grey undertones based on the fact that the yarn is dyes over a mix of white, natural white and natural grey sheep fleeces. which is pretty exciting, and it means that everything has just got lovely depth, and the yarn picks up light in a very nuanced and tonal way, particularly natural light. So argile, and I thought I'd put it on. It's for my grandma, speaking of grannies, and her birthday is not till August, but she's been begging me for knitwear for quite a few years, and I thought I would do it for her now. And it was really fun to knit pattern. It used 5.5mm needles, and it really was quick work, and it's pink work too. And I lengthened the sleeves, which is the most obvious alteration, and they're about 2 inches too short for me, but I hope that because she is 3 inches shorter than me in height, which is about 7.5 centimeters, I hope it's going to be okay, and they'll just be full length on her. And anyway, she always wears long sleeves anyway, so I think it will be okay if a little bit of her t-shirt shows around the cuff, or her shirt cuff. And then the other alteration I made is, this is a bottom up raglan knit in pieces, and I just added some short rows to the scoop here at the back neck, just about 1 inch, just to raise it up slightly. So hopefully you can see that, because I can't. So just a simple alteration to make it a little bit less gapey. And then I think my gauge was a little bit off as well. I think my row gauge was a bit too short, so I had to shove in a few extra rows here and there. Can't quite remember, just because it knit up so quickly. It was like over in a flash. I was like, oh, it's done, I've got to seam it. And then last episode I thought I had loads of seaming shoot, but I'd even done most of that. So just the whole thing was a delightful experience, delightful yarn. I think I made the second size, but my gauge was slightly on the small size, so it kind of came out at the smallest size or something along those lines, because my granny's got she's a very small boned, petite woman, of as many people of her generation I guess are. So yeah, I think it will work well on her, and feeling very warm wearing it, and maybe wishing I was still in my pyjamas. So yeah, what else to say about this really? It's just really lovely. Like, I just want to cuddle myself up. It's plump and cushy, and I would love yarn in, you know, in another shade of Gilliatt to make something for myself. But I've got a lot of Stashless work to be doing. The other thing I think is really great about this is its depth of colour, which means that I think that this shade of pink will be quite flattering on a range of skin tones. I briefly spoke about this last episode when I talked about yellow being quite a tricky colour for olive skin tones, and I have had quite a number of people through the last year of podcasting and Instagram posting talk about my use of colour, and that's something, you know, very important to me, that I make quite a big deal of on this channel, my use of colour theory and so on. And I'm wondering if that is interesting to any more of you, and if you'd like to hear a little bit more about colour and personal style. Just get in touch and let me know. As I've mentioned before, I do welcome suggestions for videos. The best place to pop a video suggestion is in the questions and video requests thread over in the Ravelry group, because that just contains it all in one place, and I'll either address it as a question inside a video, or I'll make a specific video for it. So yeah, do feel free to put stuff there, and I've got lots and lots of different ideas. It's just the time, isn't it, to get around to doing it, especially when I've discovered overall in this channel that, like, my vlogs, these podcasts are the most popular, and because my tutorials, I guess they're quite niche, don't always get as many views as other things, which is a bit of a shame. But if you have a burning question or idea, or, you know, even if you want to discuss it, you know, it could go back and forth a little bit, do hop over to the Ravelry group and pop it there. So I'm not doing conversational threads this week, because I think this has gone on for quite a lot of time, but I'll just mention briefly Larder Life. So I did a little bit more foraging for elderflower, and I made elderflower cordial. So this is actually only half of what I've got, in an old gin bottle and one of those reusable, like, glass bottles, which, by the way, be careful when you sterilize, because I thought that the lid was ceramic, and I was trying the method where you put it in the oven to like burn off the water to sterilize it. And it turned out that the stopper of this bottle, the original stopper, was actually plastic, not ceramic. So more for me that I was tricked by the convincing texture of the fake and like weight of the fake ceramic. So that was melted off, and I've just got a temporary wine bottle stopper there. So yeah, I did elderflower cordial. So now is the time, if you are in the south of England, some of the elderflower might be like well opened and even gone a bit crispy, but I think you'll still be able to find some. Just make sure that you're allowed to forage in the area that you're in, because some places, such as for example Epping Forest in East London, you know, it's actually illegal to forage in that place, but in other places it's quite fine. And then make sure that you're collecting it from a tree that is off the road. So I do it in a park, and we've got a biodiversity wildlife zone with like a little, there's like a post that actually says foraging zone, which is why I assumed that it's okay to pick from there. And also in another part of the park, there's like all these fruit trees that were planted, and there's a sign that says feel free to pick the fruit trees. So I just put two together. Yeah, so just make sure that you pick it from somewhere that is off road, and enjoy your lovely elderflower champagne. Oh, and the third tip is to do it in the morning, definitely before noon, ideally at like 8 or 9 in the morning. I'm not a morning person, so this is quite challenging for me. And when you're standing underneath that tree in the morning and you just inhale, after having taken one's high strength antihistamines, obviously, it really is the most amazing uplifting champagne kind of smell. But if you get there too late, it smells of cat's urine. And on that delightful note, I think I will sign off this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this episode, do give me a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. Again, a massive thank you to everybody who has recently purchased my patterns, my knitting patterns from my Ravelry shop, and bought me a coffee. It is so appreciated, and yeah, I can't thank you enough for the belief in me and the fiscal investment in my channel and all of my creative endeavours. So thank you so much. If you're interested in buying me a coffee or any of that, links are in the down bar here below. And lastly, do remember to sign up for my monthly newsletter, Postcards from the Crimson Stitchery. It's completely free, and you just get an extra dose of crimson ramblings, thoughts, colour and, you know, backstage photographs in your inbox at some point at the beginning of each month. Thanks everyone, take care, stay well, bye bye.